Welcome children. Today we will study and continue with the chapter on drainage for standard 9th, and this is part 3 of this chapter. Today we are going to learn in detail about the Peninsula Rivers. Children, in the Peninsula Plateau we have the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats. Now the Western Ghats, they are continuous hills running from north to south, and in the Eastern Ghats we have discontinuous hills. You can refer to this when we have done the physical features of India. You can refer to my video when I had explained about the Ghats. Now here the Western Ghats act as a water divide. Now what I told you, what is a water divide, is whenever there is a mountain or a upland, it influences the flow of the river. So rivers do not cross or cut the water divider. So the rivers which flow on the right remain on the right, and rivers which flow on the left will go to the left. This acts as a water divide, so it divides the river. Another important thing is that because the Western Ghats are sloping towards the east, so most of the rivers which originate in the Western Ghats flow towards the east and drain into the Bay of Bengal. Very few flow major two rivers, which is Narbada and Tapi, flow towards the west side and drain into the Arabian Sea. And you can see between the Western Ghats and Western Coast there is a narrow stretch of land, isn't it? So that hardly has any space for the rivers to form delta. So they form estuaries, where most of the rivers which flow into the Bay of Bengal form deltas. Okay, so in my next slide I will be explaining to you what is a delta and an estuary. Now children, let us have a look at the difference between delta and estuary. As I told you, most of the east flowing rivers from the Western Ghats form a delta, and they travel a long distance. So when they travel a long distance, they carry a lot of sand and silt with them and get accumulated at the mouth of the river, and they are unable to flow into the sea. So they form distributaries and channels, finger-like projections, and then they empty out. Whereas the estuary, they flow from the mountains and they don't have to travel a long distance, so they carry not much of sand and silt, and when they enter the sea, all the sand and silt is carried away by the waves and the currents. So that is why the best flowing rivers, they have a shorter distance when they empty out into the sea, and even if they are bringing sand and silt, they are carried away by the waves and the currents, so they form an estuary. So what is this is delta. You can see the difference, finger like projections, whereas estuaries is the river is directly emptying out into the sea without any finger like projections being formed. Now that question rises in your mind, why west flowing rivers don't form deltas? Now one of the another reasons, as I told you just now, is because the Western Ghats are slightly higher and are sloping towards the east. So most of the rivers are draining towards the east and empty into the Bay of Bengal. Okay, and the space between the Eastern Ghats and the Bay of Bengal, the land between them there's plenty of land, so there's enough space for the rivers to form a delta. Whereas you can see in the western coast, they come down towards steep slope, okay, and they directly enter into the sea. So they form estuaries. There is hardly any space for them to form a delta. There's narrow space between the Western Ghats and the Arabian Sea. It's a narrow land that is available, okay, and they come down the steep slope. That is the reason why west flowing rivers don't form deltas. So now children, let us look at the main peninsular rivers. You can see here on the west coast we have Narbada and Tapi. These are major rivers which flow westwards and drain into the Arabian Sea. And then we have other major rivers which are flowing eastwards and drain into the Bay of Bengal, although they originate in the Western Ghats. Because of the slope of the Western Ghats, they drain into Bay of Bengal. They are Mahanadi, Godavari, Krishna and Kaveri. Now we will learn about each of them in detail. Now some other west flowing rivers which drain into the Arabian Sea, you can see Sabarmati, Mahi and Bharatpuzha. Okay, So these are some of the west flowing rivers. These are small rivers which drain into the Arabian Sea. Okay, Sabarmati, Mahi and Bharatpuzha. Now some small east flowing rivers like Damodar, Subarnarekha, Brahmani and Baitarni, they all flow eastwards and drain into Bay of Bengal. Now we'll start with the first major Peninsula River, that is River Narbada. You can see the origin of River Narbada is in the Amarkantak hills in Madhya Pradesh, and you can see the journey of this river till it finally reaches the Arabian Sea where it empties it out. River Narbada flows westwards and it flows in a rift valley which was formed due to faulting. Now, what is a rift valley? Now, rift valley is formed due to the movement of tectonic plates when the crack develops between two tectonic plates, and when these plates move apart, what happens? The center portion sinks down, forming a rift valley. Now, how was this Narbada and Tapi river flowing through a rift valley? So, when the Himalayas rose from the Tethys Sea, the peninsula as a whole was little affected, but there were falls created, okay, creating of falls, that is creating of the rift valley, and Narbada and Tapi began to flow through these rift valley. And why did they flow to the west? Because the falls were westwards, it was created towards the westward side. So all the rivers, that is Narbada and Tapi, the major rivers, they flow to the west because they have a steep slope, okay. So that is the reason why Narbada and Tapi flow through a rift valley. So here is a picture showing you the flow of Narbada through a rift valley. Now River Narbada, when it flows towards the sea, when it flows towards emptying into the sea and reaching to the sea, it forms many picturesque locations all around. You can see the formation of marble rocks, okay, when passing through the rift valley. Then you can see the river tumbling through steep rocks forming the Dhuandar Falls, and these two are the beautiful locations which you can see in Jabalpur. Children, this map shows clearly the journey of River Narbada. You can see it rises from the Amarkantak hills in Madhya Pradesh, and you can see it flowing between two mountain ranges, Vindhya and Satpura, where it has been created a rift valley. Okay, and it flows through it because the slope is towards the west. These rivers are flowing towards the west and emptying out into the Arabian Sea. So you can see the flow to the Satpura range in Madhya Pradesh, then comes into Gujarat, reaches Bharuch and empties out in the Gulf of Khambar, that is the Arabian Sea. So this is the entire journey of River Narbada, and the states that it crosses are Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. Now children, here is a tabulated form of all the facts about River Narbada for your learning. You can see the origin is at Amarkantak Hills in Madhya Pradesh. The mouth is Arabian Sea. The length is 860 kilometers, and the state it enters and drains is Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. The left bank tributaries, although they are not mentioned in your textbook, but just for your information, they are Borhor, Banjar and Sher. Right bank tributaries are Orsang, Barna and Kolar. River Tapi rises in the Satpura range in the Betul district of Madhya Pradesh. It flows in a rift valley parallel to the Narbada river. Now the length of this river Tapi is much shorter than Narbada, and it drains Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat and Maharashtra. So you can see this river Tapi is much shorter in length as compared to River Narbada. You can see it starts from here and then gets into Maharashtra and then Gujarat near Surat and drains into the Gulf of Khambat. A quick recap on River Tapi. Origin Satpura range in the Betul district of Madhya Pradesh. Mouth is Arabian Sea. Length is 860 kilometers. The state it enters are Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. Its left bank tributaries are Bagur, Amravati and Bure. Right bank tributaries are Sukhi, Gomai and Arunavati. River Godavari rises from the slopes of the Western Ghats in the Nasik district of Maharashtra. River Godavari is the largest peninsular river. Now, River Godavari starts from the slopes of the Western Ghats and then it flows eastwards and drains into the Bay of Bengal. This entire journey is 1500 kilometers, and because of its length, it is called as Dakshin Ganga. Now, it is joined by many tributaries. They are Manjara, Purna, Penganga, Vardha, Venganga and Pranhita. Okay, and it drains Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. Now for River Godavari, origin slopes of Western Ghats in Nasik district of Maharashtra, mouth Bay of Bengal. It is also called as Dakshin Ganga and is the longest river in the Peninsula Plateau. Length is 1500 kilometers. The state it enters are Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. Its left bank tributaries are Purna, Vardha, Pranhita, Penganga and right bank tributaries is Manjira. River Mahanadi rises in the highlands of Chhattisgarh. It then flows through Odisha and reaches Bay of Bengal, and the length of this river is 860 kilometers, and the drainage of this river is shared by Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand and Odisha. Now quick facts on River Mahanadi. Origin is highlands of Chhattisgarh, mouth is Bay of Bengal, length is 860 kilometers and the state it enters are Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand and Odisha. Although the tributaries are not mentioned in your textbook, just for academic sake and academic interest, I am putting it here. Left bank tributaries are Sionath, Hasdeo, Mand, Id and right bank tributaries are Ong, Tel and Jonk. River Krishna rises from a spring near Mahabaleshwar. Now River Krishna rises from a spring near Mahabaleshwar and then it flows for around 1400 kilometers and reaches the Bay of Bengal where it drains. Okay, the main tributaries of River Krishna are Tungabhadra, Ghat Prabha, Koyna, Bhima and Musi, and its drainage is shared by Maharashtra, Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. Now River Krishna, origin is spring near Mahabaleshwar, mouth is Bay of Bengal, length is 1400 kilometers. The state it enters are Maharashtra, Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. Left bank tributaries are Musi and Bhima. Right bank tributaries are Tungabhadra, Ghat Prabha and Koyna. River Kaveri rises in the Brahmagiri range of the Western Ghats. Now River Kaveri starts from the Brahmagiri range of the Western Ghats and then it flows into south of Cuddalore in Tamil Nadu and finally it drains in the Bay of Bengal. This entire journey is about 760 kilometers and the main tributaries of Kaveri River are Amravati, Bhavani, Kabani and Hemavati, and it drains Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. River Kaveri makes the second biggest waterfall in India, known as Shiv Sundaram Falls, and the hydroelectricity generated is now supplied to Mysore, Bengal and Kolar gold fields. Now a quick recap for River Kaveri. Origin is Brahmagiri range of Western Ghats, mouth is Bay of Bengal, south of Cuddalore in Tamil Nadu. Length is 760 kilometers. State it enters are Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Left bank tributary is Hemavati and right bank tributaries are Amravati, Bhavani and Kabani. Children, with this we complete the third part of the chapter on drainage, and we will complete the entire lesson in the fourth part, and which I will be uploading soon. Till then, please view and subscribe. Thank you.